Millionaire secretly meets mistress pregnant wife, finds out and kicks him out with nothing. They said Michael Redwood had it all: wealth, a sprawling estate, devoted employees, and a beautiful wife expecting his heir. But under the polished surface of charity dinners and high society galas lay secrets that threatened to topple his world. Rumors of an illicit affair with a mysterious woman began circulating in hushed whispers. As his pregnant wife, Elizabeth, felt his distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that her once loving husband was slipping away. When the truth finally exploded into the open, no fortune or social prestige could spare Michael from losing everything. This is the story of betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected fight for redemption. Michael Redwood was a name synonymous with success. He was in his mid-30s, tall, and carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. The Redwood family estate in Fairfield County, Connecticut, boasted a sweeping driveway lined with blooming white azaleas in the summer, leading to a stately brick mansion that once belonged to a Gilded Age railroad baron. Michael had taken the mansion into the modern era with top-tier renovations, marble floors, glass chandeliers, and cutting-edge technology in every room. On the surface, he was the enviable picture of a self-made millionaire. Over a decade prior, as a fresh-faced graduate from Columbia University, Michael had leveraged a small inheritance from his late father, Robert Redwood, into a lucrative real estate venture. From flipping houses in struggling neighborhoods to investing in commercial properties that turned eye-popping profits, his Midas touch became almost legendary in the world of property development. But beyond the press releases and philanthropic events was a man whose hunger for success often eclipsed his sense of responsibility. Michael believed in winning at all costs, in business and, unfortunately, sometimes in personal relationships as well. His wife, Elizabeth Redwood née Hastings, was an elegant presence. 5 years younger than Michael, she came from old money, but unlike many of her peers, she was philanthropic to her core. A dedicated volunteer in children's hospitals and community centers, Elizabeth spent her days working on the Redwood Foundation's various projects. Where Michael's eyes were always fixed on the next million-dollar deal, Elizabeth focused on where their fortunes could help others. Their marriage, from the outside, resembled a fairy tale. They hosted lavish dinner parties attended by politicians, socialites, and celebrities. Their photographs graced the Philanthropists of the Year section in national magazines. And now, after 5 years of marriage, Elizabeth was expecting their first child, a blessing that promised to strengthen their family legacy. One summer afternoon, Elizabeth, who was in her 5th month of pregnancy, decided it was time for the two of them to sit down and discuss some changes they needed to make around the house rooms to convert into a nursery, new schedules to accommodate a baby's needs, and the additional help they would require. She imagined Michael might be concerned about his increasingly busy travel schedule, but she had faith that he would adapt. After all, he had always doted on her, right from the moment they met at a charity ball in Manhattan years ago. Michael had been particularly elusive that week. Elizabeth chalked it up to a high-pressure real estate deal he'd been chasing in Boston. She was used to his intense focus whenever he was pursuing a big fish, as he called it. Still, she couldn't ignore a nagging sense of unease that had grown in her gut over the last few months. Little things: Michael's phone constantly buzzing, his abrupt departures for last-minute meetings, and unexplained credit card transactions in places she knew he didn't do business. But Elizabeth was determined to remain trusting. He was her husband, the father of her unborn child, a pillar of society who had proven himself reliable time and again. If there was a shadow looming over them, she wanted to believe it was just her own anxiety playing tricks on her. She breathed in the fragrant summer air, gazing at the subtle shimmer of the estate's backyard swimming pool. She felt a sense of calm and told herself that whatever was burdening Michael, they would face it together. If only she had known the secrets that would soon shatter their perfect world. One particular evening, after Elizabeth had drifted off to sleep, Michael found himself in his home office, lit only by a single lamp on the antique mahogany desk. His phone vibrated a text message from a name he had saved under MH, so Elizabeth wouldn't suspect. In truth, MH stood for Sienna Henderson. Sienna was unlike any woman Michael had encountered. He first met her at a luxury car expo in Manhattan 3 months earlier. She was standing beside a cherry-red Aston Martin, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, exuding confidence and intrigue in the way she carried herself. Michael had approached her, initially drawn by her beauty, but soon realized Sienna possessed a quick wit and an air of mystery that he found intoxicating. She didn't see him as just a wealthy man. She challenged him, teased him, and even dismissed him when she thought he was trying too hard to impress. He craved that excitement. For years, Michael had lived in a world where everyone either idolized or needed something from him. Here was a woman who treated him like a mere mortal, and it thrilled him in ways he couldn't explain. The line between a harmless flirtation and a dangerous affair blurred the night they shared a glass of champagne at her downtown loft. "Miss you," the text read. Michael typed back a brief reply, "Meet you tomorrow. Same place, 7 p.m. He put the phone down, guilt swirling in his chest. He knew Elizabeth was kind, trusting everything he once thought he wanted in a life partner. Yet he found himself seeking out Sienna's unpredictability. Why couldn't he have been satisfied with the stable life he had built? Meanwhile, rumors began trickling through the tight-knit circles of high society. A friend of Elizabeth's, Sarah Chamberlain, dropped by for afternoon tea and couldn't resist hinting at an unsettling piece of gossip she'd heard at a fundraiser. Some people claimed they saw Michael leaving a hotel bar with an attractive brunette. They left together, stepping into Michael's car. Elizabeth tried to brush off Sarah's insinuations, yet a seed of doubt was planted that day. She began noticing more and more suspicious patterns, late-night calls from unknown numbers, unexplained charges on their joint account in places she had never heard of, and the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his jacket. Word also reached Michael's closest confidant, James Carter, who had gone to college with him. James had always been one to tell Michael the harsh truth, and he was worried. At a charity gala, he cornered Michael near the buffet table, out of earshot of others. "Look, I've heard things," James murmured, swirling a glass of scotch. "I'm not going to judge you, but you need to be careful. Elizabeth's pregnant. For God's sake, don't ruin a good thing." Michael averted his eyes, feigning nonchalance. "Thanks, James, but it's nothing. Don't believe the gossip columns." James placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, searching his eyes. "For the sake of your family, be certain of what you're doing." As Michael walked away, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was determined to keep his secret. On the other, a wave of shame threatened to crush him every time he glimpsed Elizabeth's growing belly. She radiated excitement and maternal warmth, carefully planning their baby's future from color schemes for the nursery to potential preschool options. Still, the pull towards Sienna was strong. She represented a life unburdened by responsibilities, a rush of adrenaline he felt he was missing in his day-to-day role as husband and father-to-be. He convinced himself he deserved these stolen moments. Hadn't he worked tirelessly for years to reach his level of success? Outside, the summer air carried whispers of storms brewing on the horizon. Unbeknownst to Michael, forces were aligning that would soon dismantle the illusion of control he believed he held over his life. The next evening, Michael carefully chose his attire. He wanted to appear effortlessly handsome rather than obviously flashy. He selected a tailored navy blazer, charcoal trousers, and a crisp white shirt. No tie to keep it casual. He told Elizabeth he had a business dinner with potential investors in the city. As always, Elizabeth trusted him. She kissed him goodbye at the door, resting her head on his shoulder for a lingering moment before he stepped into his Mercedes. Michael ignored the pang in his chest. He drove to a discreet boutique hotel in the Upper East Side, the Talmadge, where Sienna had booked a suite. This hotel was known among certain circles for its absolute discretion. Sienna was waiting for him in the lobby, wearing a sleek black dress that accentuated her figure. Her eyes flickered with excitement when she saw him. In the privacy of the suite, the two shared a bottle of champagne. Sienna leaned against the window, looking out onto the city skyline. "I was worried you wouldn't come," she said, her voice low, almost vulnerable. It struck Michael that despite her bravado, she had grown attached to him. That realization gave him an odd sense of power. "Of course I came," he replied, placing the champagne flute on a side table. He approached her, gently lifting a strand of hair off her shoulder. "How could I stay away?" For a moment, guilt stabbed at him again. He thought of Elizabeth at home, probably sitting in the living room with a baby name book in her lap. Did she have dinner alone tonight? His heart twisted. He swallowed the discomfort, telling himself he'd deal with it later. Sienna poured them another round and softly traced her finger along Michael's lapel. "What will happen when the baby's born? Will you still be able to sneak away?" Her eyes were hungry for assurance. Michael hesitated before he responded. "I'll make time." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. Part of him wondered, was he lying to her, to himself, or both? Their conversation shifted to more mundane topics, art shows. Sienna wanted to attend. Business deals Michael was negotiating. But beneath the surface, an undeniable tension pulsed. They both knew this relationship was more than a casual fling, yet they also knew it was built on borrowed time. Meanwhile, back at the Redwood estate, Elizabeth tried to sleep. She tossed and turned, feeling an odd emptiness on Michael's side of the bed. She told herself it was just hormones, that expecting mothers often felt anxious. Still, she couldn't fully shake the memory of Sarah Chamberlain's insinuations. Around midnight, she padded to the kitchen in her silk robe to brew herbal tea. In the quiet expanse of the mansion, her mind wandered to lonely thoughts of betrayal. Early the next morning, Michael slipped back into the house, thinking Elizabeth would be asleep. He was startled to find her sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea. Her eyes were bleary, her hair disheveled. She looked so young and fragile in that moment that he felt a surge of protectiveness. Elizabeth gave him a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Long night?" she asked softly. He nodded, not meeting her gaze. "Yes, sorry, it ran later than expected." Elizabeth said nothing else. She simply studied him for a few seconds, then stood up and walked over to the sink. Watching her, Michael was seized by a foreboding sense that the walls were slowly closing in. He forced a grin and made his way upstairs, determined to shake off the ominous feeling. Unbeknownst to him, Elizabeth had already begun her own quiet investigation. She couldn't allow herself to fully trust or to fully believe the rumors. She needed proof. And so, the first tiny crack in their marriage, once thought unbreakable, widened. Determined to protect her marriage and dispel any doubts, Elizabeth decided to take methodical steps. She began by examining the details of Michael's schedule. She'd known him for years, had been by his side as he built his empire, and was familiar with his legitimate business patterns. She felt she could distinguish normal real estate deals from a suspicious new pattern if one truly existed. Quietly, she started making notes. When Michael said he was meeting with Jonas and company, investors, she'd mark the time and place he claimed to be. She'd then compare that to the credit card statements, discovering whether the charges aligned with the hotel restaurant or if they were located elsewhere. It was painstaking work, but she did it with calm resolve. Simultaneously, Elizabeth confided in a close friend outside their usual social circle, Monica Reyes, an old college roommate who now worked in private investigations. Monica had always teased Elizabeth that she was wasting her keen observation skills on philanthropic committees. Now, Elizabeth hoped those skills could be put to better use. "I never wanted to believe I'd need something like this," Elizabeth confessed to Monica over the phone. "But I can't confront Michael without real evidence. He's so convincing that I might end up believing him if he denies it outright." Monica's voice was reassuring. "You're doing the right thing. Emotions are high, but it's important to stay grounded in facts before you act. I can help discreetly verify some of his movements if you'd like." Elizabeth hesitated, then agreed. Part of her felt guilty for spying on her husband, the man she'd pledged to love through thick and thin. Yet, the bigger part of her was outraged that he might be making a fool of her, especially when she was pregnant with his child. One evening, when Michael claimed he had to fly to Boston for a pivotal meeting, Elizabeth called Monica. "Follow him," she requested, a slight tremor in her voice. "See where he really goes." Michael left in the late afternoon, a garment bag slung over his shoulder, hugging Elizabeth lightly before heading out. Monica was already waiting in her car near the Redwood estate. She trailed Michael's Mercedes along the highway for almost an hour. Instead of heading to the airport, Michael veered off toward a smaller town. Monica watched as he pulled into a high-end resort nestled by a lake. He parked, and, moments later, a woman in a red coat slipped into his car. Monica snapped a few photos on her phone, capturing the unmistakable forms of Michael Redwood and Sienna Henderson locked in an embrace. Back at the Redwood mansion, Elizabeth was pacing her bedroom. She glanced at the crib that had just been delivered, still in its packaging, waiting to be assembled for their baby. Her stomach roiled with anticipation and dread. A short while later, her phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "I have proof. Call me." That night, Elizabeth cried herself to sleep for the first time since her mother's funeral. She kept hearing Michael's lies reverberate in her mind: work trips, investor dinners, urgent business calls. In that moment, all the illusions of her marriage began to fracture. Yet, she wasn't entirely ready to confront him. She knew a confrontation would unleash chaos, and she wanted to gather her strength and think of the baby. Her father had always taught her never to go to battle unprepared. So Elizabeth decided to wait, to plan her moment carefully, to protect her unborn child's future. She determined that she would not be the only one who lost out when the truth came to light. Michael's double life was becoming more complicated. His every waking moment felt like a juggling act. On one side, he had his wife, the woman carrying his child, his social equal at banquets, the benevolent face behind the Redwood Foundation. On the other, he had Sienna, a woman who ignited a passion in him he hadn't felt in years. He sensed time was running out, though he was too consumed by temptation to stop. Late one night, guilt overcame him. He was in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to Elizabeth's soft breathing. The baby's due date was inching closer. Elizabeth's belly had grown more pronounced, and Michael often felt the baby kick against his palm when he remembered to ask about her day or rub her stomach. Each time he experienced that tiny flutter, an inexplicable fear and guilt surfaced. What was he doing? "Are you all right?" Elizabeth murmured, turning slightly. The moonlight highlighted the concern etched on her face. "Yeah," he whispered, forcing a gentle smile. "Just thinking about work." She nodded, half asleep, but leaned her head on his shoulder. Eventually, her breathing slowed again, and Michael was left alone with his thoughts. He told himself he had to end things with Sienna. He would do it tomorrow or maybe next week. But soon, very soon. At dawn, he woke early, deciding to clear his head with a run around the estate grounds. He jogged past the meticulously trimmed hedges and through the small orchard. The sky was a blend of pastel pinks and oranges. He recalled the early days of his marriage, when he and Elizabeth dreamed of raising a family on this very property. She had imagined setting up an outdoor children's playhouse under the shade of the big oak tree. That dream was closer than ever to coming true, but now it was tainted by his own betrayal. Michael slowed as he reached the orchard's edge, doubling over as if physically burdened by his secrets. For the first time, he felt real doubt. What if Elizabeth found out? Would she take him for everything he had? Would she be too devastated to keep living with him? Even if she stayed, would their marriage ever recover? The heartbreak in her eyes would be unbearable. Yet, the idea of cutting ties with Sienna also felt agonizing. She had become an escape, a different life, a rush he had grown addicted to. He had convinced himself that he was entitled to chase this thrill, having worked so hard for so long. Deep down, though, the rational side of him recognized that no justification could excuse the pain he was inflicting. Sighing heavily, he wiped the sweat from his brow and jogged back to the house. By the time he stepped into the foyer, he could smell coffee brewing. Elizabeth was in the kitchen, wearing a silky maternity robe and looking radiant. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and the gentle curve of her stomach was all too real. She handed him a cup of coffee with a small smile. "You look like you've been running for miles," she noted, her tone light, though her eyes held a distant sadness. "Just needed to clear my head," he muttered. She hesitated, as though wanting to say something else. Instead, she just nodded and busied herself with preparing toast. Michael watched her, conflicted, knowing that any day now the fragile facade he'd built could crumble. But he was too paralyzed to act, torn between the life he'd always known and the illicit excitement he couldn't let go of. As the weeks passed, Elizabeth gathered more evidence of Michael's indiscretions. Monica, her friend in private investigations, provided her with a detailed file, photos of Michael and Sienna, entering restaurants, hotels, even stepping onto a yacht Michael had rented under a shell company. The evidence was overwhelming. Elizabeth spent countless nights weeping quietly in the library, clutching the baby monitor that she used to listen to the baby's heartbeat. Every time she saw Michael's face, her anger mingled with a profound sadness. She recalled the vows they had exchanged on their wedding day, to be faithful, to support each other in sickness and in health. It seemed so distant now, as though it had happened to two other people. She wasn't sure what hurt more, his betrayal or the realization that she had never truly known the man she'd married. The Redwood estate felt strangely haunted. The staff sensed the shift in atmosphere. The head housekeeper, Marjorie Cummings, had served Elizabeth since she was a child and had come to live in the Redwood mansion after the wedding. Marjorie noticed Elizabeth's swollen eyes and her pensive silences. One day, in a moment of private concern, Marjorie approached her in the upstairs hallway. "My dear, you don't look well," Marjorie said softly. "If there's anything you need, please remember I'm here for you." Elizabeth nodded, her voice trembling with unspoken pain. "Thank you, Marjorie. I appreciate that more than you know." Marjorie gave her a warm, motherly pat on the arm. She had her suspicions about what might be causing Elizabeth's distress, but she knew better than to voice them. She was certain that her mistress would handle the situation with dignity. One of the more difficult tasks for Elizabeth was pretending everything was normal to the outside world. Invitations for baby showers arrived, and well-wishers dropped off gifts daily, from plush toys to designer baby clothes. Each time, Elizabeth forced a grateful smile, wondering how many of these guests had heard rumors of Michael's infidelity. The Redwood name was always a topic of high interest, especially among the upper crust. Determined not to appear weak or naive, Elizabeth quietly sought legal advice from a reputable family law attorney, Teresa Bloom. Teresa had a formidable reputation and was known for protecting her clients with relentless vigor. Teresa listened intently as Elizabeth hesitantly explained her predicament. "I still love him," Elizabeth confessed, "but I can't let him walk all over me, and I need to think about my child." Teresa sighed, leaning back in her leather chair. "Elizabeth, you have every right to protect yourself and your unborn baby. The law can be on your side if you plan carefully. If you decide to file for divorce or separate, we need to secure your financial stability. Prenups, property divisions, everything must be addressed with precision." Elizabeth clutched her handbag tighter, her eyes brimming. "I'm not sure I want a divorce yet, but I won't be a doormat either. Is there a way to ensure the baby and I are safe if things go badly?" Teresa nodded. "Absolutely. We can set up measures to freeze certain assets, or at least make sure you have control over enough funds and properties to support yourself. If you choose to separate, I'll make sure you have the upper hand." Though Elizabeth left the office with a heavy heart, she felt a spark of empowerment. The knowledge that she had options, that she wasn't merely a victim, gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She was preparing for a storm that felt inevitable, but she would do so on her terms. One thing was certain: if Michael truly was betraying her trust, she would not let him destroy their child's future or hers without a fight. While Elizabeth strategized her next move, Sienna was busy orchestrating hers. She had grown tired of being a clandestine fixture in Michael's life. As the months passed, she realized she wanted more than secret rendezvous and fleeting glimpses of a double life. She saw in Michael not just a wealthy man, but a potential future. Perhaps she believed that with enough pressure he would leave his wife and start anew with her. Or perhaps she simply refused to stay in the shadows forever. One afternoon, Sienna invited Michael to her loft. It was a converted industrial space in a trendy part of Manhattan. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, revealing her collection of abstract paintings and minimalist furniture. Usually Michael would arrive with a playful grin, eager for their trysts. This time, tension lined his features. He suspected Sienna's restlessness. He sensed a confrontation brewing. As soon as he stepped in, Sienna locked the door behind him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steely. Michael set down his briefcase, exhaling. "All right, I'm listening." She crossed her arms, staring him down. "I'm done with this half-life. I see you once or twice a week if I'm lucky. I can't even call you whenever I want, can't show up at your place. I want more than that." He raked a hand through his hair, throat tight. "Sienna, you know how complicated this is. Elizabeth's pregnant. I can't just—" She cut him off, her anger flaring. "Don't say you can't just leave her. You can do whatever you want, Michael. You're choosing to keep me a secret because you're scared of the fallout. So let me give you a reason to be scared." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with resolve. "You walk away from me, and I'll make sure everyone knows about us. I'll go to the press if I have to." Imagine the headlines. "Michael Redwood's mistress spills all." Michael felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. The potential damage to his reputation, to his carefully curated image, was staggering. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Sienna, I don't respond well to threats." She didn't blink. "It's not a threat. It's a fact. If you want me to stay quiet, then prove you want me in your life fully." She paused, her expression unreadable. "Leave her and be with me." He forced himself to keep his voice calm, though panic roiled within him. "You're asking me to walk away from my marriage while Elizabeth is carrying my child. That's cruel, unthinkable." Sienna's lips quivered in a moment of vulnerability. "What about me, Michael? Am I just a fling you'll toss aside once the baby is born? I have feelings too." A complex swirl of emotions warred inside him: remorse, anger, lust, fear. He swallowed hard. "I need time to think. I can't make this decision overnight." Sienna's posture remained defiant, but her eyes flickered with a hint of desperation. "Fine. but don't think time will make me forget what I want. If you won't choose, I'll force your hand." Michael left the loft feeling the walls of his life closing in from all sides. His affair, once thrilling, had become a noose tightening around his neck. Neither Elizabeth nor Sienna seemed likely to sit idly by anymore. He was barreling toward a reckoning, and deep down, he knew it was the result of his own reckless choices. A few days later, Elizabeth decided the moment for confrontation had arrived. She'd spent countless hours crying, raging, and plotting. She was done waiting for Michael to come clean on his own. With the overwhelming evidence Monica had gathered, Elizabeth felt the weight of heartbreak, but she also felt ready to reclaim her dignity. That evening, after dinner, she asked Michael to join her in the living room. She deliberately chose this room because of its large windows overlooking the estate's manicured lawns, a testament to their shared life together, which was now on the brink of collapse. She perched on the edge of a chaise longue, her spine stiff with determination. Michael could sense her unease. He set aside his phone, feeling a pit form in his stomach. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, attempting to sound casual. Elizabeth inhaled deeply. "I need you to be honest with me." "Are you involved with another woman?" He stiffened. Several seconds ticked by in oppressive silence. Finally, he forced out a half-lie, hoping to salvage the situation. "I've had some meetings with new contacts." "Nothing personal," she cut him off, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "Don't lie to me, Michael. I have pictures, emails, our receipts. I know about Sienna." She pulled a folder from a nearby table and set it down between them. The gesture was almost ceremonial. Michael's eyes fell on the folder, and a wave of nausea swept over him. This was worse than he had imagined. Elizabeth wasn't just suspicious, she had proof. "Elizabeth the First," he began, his voice faltering. Her eyes glistened with tears, though her posture remained firm. "How long?" she demanded. He hesitated, swallowing hard. "A few months." The admission spilled into the room like poison. Elizabeth exhaled, as though releasing something toxic from her lungs. "While I've been carrying our child," she whispered, "you've been sneaking off to be with her." Michael rubbed his temples, the guilt now roaring through his bloodstream. "I'm sorry," he pleaded. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" Elizabeth's voice rose, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Was I not enough? Did our vows mean nothing?" He reached out, but she recoiled. "Elizabeth, you're more than enough. This was my failing. There's no excuse. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop." She let out a bitter laugh, wiping her tears angrily. "Didn't know how to stop? You're a grown man. You could have walked away from her at any time, but you chose not to." Michael closed his eyes, overwhelmed by shame. "I know. I was stupid, selfish. I can't lose you. I'll end it. I promise." His voice cracked with desperation. She shook her head, clenching her jaw to steady herself. "It's too late for promises. You broke us, Michael. My trust in you is gone." She paused, letting that settle. "I want you out." His eyes flew open, shock registering. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your things. Leave. This is my house too, in fact. Thanks to my father's inheritance, I'm the majority owner of this property. I don't want you under the same roof as me or our child." Fear ignited in his chest. "Elizabeth, please. Let's talk this through. I'll do whatever it takes, therapy, public apology, you name it." "I can't just leave." Her tears fell freely now, her voice ragged with heartbreak. "You already left me, Michael, months ago when you started this affair. I'm just making it official." She looked away, tears glistening on her lashes. "Don't make me call security." Defeated, he rose slowly, feeling as though the ground had been ripped from beneath his feet. He trudged upstairs, numb. Within the hour, he walked out the front door with a suitcase in hand. The grandeur of the estate that once symbolized success and power now felt like a mocking testament to everything he had lost. He glanced back at the silhouette of his pregnant wife in the living room window, but she did not move to stop him. Michael checked into a modest hotel across town, far from the opulent comforts he was used to. Even the basic room with its beige walls and bland paintings felt foreign, a stark reminder of how quickly his fortunes had changed. He spent his first night there staring at the ceiling, tormented by images of Elizabeth's tear-streaked face. In the morning, he awoke to dozens of missed calls and messages. Several were from Sienna, but most were from business associates and tabloids. The news of the Redwood marriage crisis had already leaked, likely spread by staff or so-called friends who thrived on gossip. Michael scanned the sensational headlines. Fairfield County's power couple splits amid cheating allegations, followed by worthless speculation from self-proclaimed insiders. He was furious and humiliated, but most of all, he was devastated for Elizabeth. She hadn't deserved this public spectacle. Text messages from mutual friends offered sympathy or demanded gossip. One from James Carter read, "What happened? Is it true? How can I help?" Michael dropped the phone with a heavy sigh, unsure if any form of help existed for a mess of his own making. Meanwhile, back at the Redwood estate, Elizabeth told the staff not to let Michael back inside. The pain of seeing him had become too great. She moved into a guest suite at the opposite end of the house. Sleeping in the master bedroom had become unbearable, filled with memories of happier times. She told herself she needed space, though her entire being yearned for a comfort she could no longer claim. Teresa Bloom, her attorney, arrived for a private meeting. Over steaming cups of chamomile tea, they discussed legal options. Elizabeth confessed she wasn't entirely sure she wanted a divorce, but she needed to protect herself and the baby. Teresa laid out possible scenarios: a legal separation with a formal arrangement for child support, asset division if she proceeded with divorce, or even the possibility of therapy and reconciliation if Michael showed genuine remorse. "I don't know if I can ever trust him again," Elizabeth whispered, her voice fragile. "But he's the father of my child. I can't just cut him out of our lives entirely." Teresa reached out and squeezed Elizabeth's hand gently. "Trust your instincts. At least this way, you have a roadmap of how to proceed." Elsewhere, Sienna found herself on the outskirts of the fallout. She watched the story unfold in real time on social media and gossip columns. Her plan to force Michael's hand had partially worked. He had been kicked out by Elizabeth. But now, Sienna was unprepared for the public scrutiny and the harsh reality of Michael's downfall. Did she want a man who might lose everything, including his wealth and social standing? Had she overplayed her hand? She mulled over these thoughts in her loft, sipping wine late into the night. A part of her felt a pang of guilt for destroying Elizabeth's marriage, but she also believed Michael wouldn't have strayed if his marriage was perfect in the first place. Still, she hadn't expected such a vicious spiral of events. Michael, in his cramped hotel room, found himself inundated by calls from reporters. His PR manager demanded a statement. He dialed James Carter in desperation. "I can't believe this is happening," Michael murmured over the phone. James sighed. "It's bad, Michael. Elizabeth's got public sympathy on her side. You need to handle this carefully. What do I do? You need to talk to Elizabeth, apologize, offer her everything she needs. Your best shot is at least being civil. If this goes to court, you could lose the estate, a sizable chunk of your businesses, and more importantly, your chance to be a proper father." Michael's chest tightened at the mention of fatherhood. He ended the call and stared at the wall. He realized, perhaps too late, that if he didn't act quickly, he might lose not just his home and reputation, but the unconditional love of his own child. Desperate for a chance to explain himself and hoping to salvage whatever was left, Michael reached out to Elizabeth. It took 3 attempts, but on a Thursday afternoon, she finally agreed to meet him at a small cafe in town. No paparazzi had tracked it yet. and she preferred to avoid further scandalous headlines. Elizabeth arrived first, accompanied by a subdued aura. She wore a simple maternity dress, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. Michael approached the table, feeling a jolt of guilt upon seeing how much her pregnancy had advanced since their last intimate interaction. She was carrying his child, and yet he had forced her into a situation where she had to protect herself from him. She did not stand to greet him, but merely nodded for him to sit. Michael sank into the chair, trying to steady his nerves. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Elizabeth folded her hands over her belly, which Michael couldn't help but notice. "We need to talk about co-parenting arrangements," she said, her tone brisk, as if in a business meeting. A pang of sorrow twisted in Michael's stomach. She had once been so warm to him, now reduced to measured indifference. "I want to be part of our child's life," he said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes." She avoided his gaze, focusing on a point beyond his shoulder. "That's easy to say now. But the moment things get complicated, you run off, don't you?" He reached out a hand, but she pulled back. "Elizabeth, I know I've broken your trust. I can't justify my actions, but I can say I'm sorry. I am so sorry." She pursed her lips, a tear threatening to escape the corner of her eye. "Your apologies won't magically erase the pain you caused me. You cheated while I was pregnant. That's a betrayal I never imagined coming from you." Michael's voice trembled. "It was a horrible mistake. I was foolish, caught up in something I thought I wanted, but it never compared to what we have." She let out a derisive laugh. "What we had, you mean?" Silence settled between them, thick with regret. Eventually, Elizabeth took a shaky breath. "I've spoken with my lawyer. You're looking at a legal separation, possibly a divorce. I'm considering all options." He resisted the urge to beg or plead. Instead, he tried to remain calm. "Please give me a chance to prove I can change. Let me go to therapy, counseling, anything. I don't want to lose you or our baby." For the first time in the conversation, Elizabeth looked directly at him, tears swimming in her eyes. "I don't trust you, and I can't keep living in a state of anxiety, wondering where you are or what you're doing." He bent his head in shame. "I understand. You'll move your things out of the house." "I don't want you there," she continued, her voice steady. "I'll have Teresa draw up an agreement for financial support for me and the baby. You will keep away until the baby is born. After that, if you want visitation, we'll arrange it formally." Michael's throat constricted. He had envisioned fatherhood as a shared journey with Elizabeth, late-night feedings together, celebrating milestones. Now he might only see his child on scheduled visits. But he also knew he had no right to demand more. "I'll sign whatever I need to. I want you to know I'm here." Elizabeth's expression softened for a moment, but the hurt remained. She picked up her handbag and stood. "I'll be in touch." Watching her walk away felt like a knife twisting in Michael's heart. He sat there long after she left, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. His carefully crafted life had unraveled, and all he could do was watch the wreckage he had caused. After weeks of swirling rumors and half-truths, the media onslaught became relentless. Various tabloids printed stories of Michael's fall from grace. Anonymous sources provided juicy details, likely staff or acquaintances eager to sell information. Suddenly, potential investors reconsidered their partnerships with Redwood Properties. A scandal-ridden CEO was not the type of figure most wanted to be associated with. Michael's business meetings became excruciating. Clients would either awkwardly avoid the topic or openly question his leadership. He found himself fighting fires on multiple fronts, employees losing morale, banks reassessing credit lines, and vendors discussing alternate ties. Some of his long-time associates quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be tarnished by the Redwood name as it took a public beating. Behind the scenes, Teresa Bloom systematically froze certain assets in Elizabeth's name. Fearing that Michael might liquidate properties or hide resources, she ensured that a portion of the Redwood estate and shares in Redwood properties were protected under Elizabeth's unborn child. It was a strategic move that effectively barred Michael from using those funds or properties as leverage. Meanwhile, Sienna realized that her affair with Michael had transformed into a liability rather than a golden ticket. She hadn't intended to trigger such widespread chaos. She had merely wanted more from Michael. Now that his empire was crumbling, she worried about her own future. While she had an upscale loft and some savings, she wasn't prepared for the negative press swirling around her name. Gossip columns labeled her a homewrecker, and hateful messages filled her social media accounts. In a last-ditch effort, Sienna tried to contact Michael, hoping they could salvage the relationship or at least support each other through the turmoil. But each time she called, her calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread. Michael was in no position to cling to her when he was fighting for the remnants of his marriage and his standing. Even James Carter, who had stood by Michael through thick and thin, warned him that Redwood Properties was on the verge of collapse if he didn't handle damage control effectively. "You need a public statement of accountability, Michael," James insisted during a late-night meeting in a half-empty bar. "Admit your mistakes. Show remorse. Do something to regain public trust." Michael took a large swig of whiskey, his eyes bloodshot. "I don't know where to begin. Everything's spiraling, and Elizabeth wants nothing to do with me," James sighed, leaning forward. "Then do it for your child. Show the world that you're taking responsibility. That might not fix your marriage, but it could restore some faith in your moral compass." The next morning, Redwood Properties' PR team released a carefully crafted statement where Michael confessed to personal failures, apologized to Elizabeth and the community, and pledged to focus on personal rehabilitation. It wasn't well received by everyone. Many dismissed it as a desperate attempt to save face. Still, a small segment of the public and some business partners acknowledged the effort. Elizabeth read the statement online, her heart twisting. It sounded polished, too neat. The Michael she had confronted weeks ago was raw and broken. This public apology felt more like a corporate press release than a sincere plea for forgiveness. Yet, she couldn't deny that at least it was a step in the right direction. She wondered if there might still be a chance for genuine remorse to shine through. The Redwood mansion stood eerily quiet without Michael's presence. Elizabeth spent her days meeting with lawyers, attending prenatal appointments, and ensuring she had everything set for the baby. At night, she would sometimes wander through the empty corridors, her thoughts drifting to past memories. The empire Michael had built once felt so secure, but now it lay in ruins, much like their marriage. A month later, Elizabeth's due date approached. She had largely shut Michael out, communicating only through lawyers regarding the baby's health and arrangements. Despite her anger and heartbreak, she couldn't bring herself to sever ties completely. She sent him periodic updates about the baby's growth, how she was measuring, what the doctor advised, and so on. Michael clung to these messages like a lifeline. During one of her final prenatal checkups, Elizabeth was surprised to find Michael in the waiting room. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his suit slightly wrinkled. The clean-shaven, impeccably groomed man she once knew had been replaced by a fraught figure, weighed down by remorse and stress. "Hi," he said softly, standing when she entered. She clutched her handbag, startled to see him. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed. "I know our communication has been minimal, but I needed to see how you and the baby are doing. I asked your OB for the appointment schedule. I hope that's okay." She considered telling him to leave, but part of her couldn't. "Well, it's just a routine check. I'm fine." They sat in silence until the nurse called her name. Without a word, Elizabeth walked in, and Michael followed. The doctor, familiar with the Redwood couple, greeted them warmly but took note of the tension in the air. Elizabeth hopped onto the examination table, and the ultrasound began. Within seconds, the rapid flicker of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. Michael held his breath, his eyes glued to the monitor, displaying the tiny form. He reached out instinctively, and for a moment Elizabeth let him rest his hand near hers. Tears glistened in Michael's eyes. It was the first time he'd seen an ultrasound in person since Elizabeth had discovered his betrayal. The reality of impending fatherhood hit him harder than ever. After the checkup, which showed the baby was healthy, Elizabeth gathered her things. She paused at the door, turning to Michael. "So, you've moved into a new apartment?" He nodded, attempting a smile. "Yeah, a small place downtown. The business is still shaky, but it's stable enough for now. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." She studied him, noticing the genuine concern etched in his features. It was the same earnest man she had once fallen in love with, but with a deep sorrow she'd never seen before. "I am. Thank you." Before they parted ways, Michael mustered the courage to ask, "Can we have dinner sometime? Just to talk." Elizabeth hesitated, memories of his betrayal still fresh, but also mindful of the fact that this man was the father of her child. "I'll think about it," she said, then slipped out the door. 2 nights later she found herself texting him, "Let's meet tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the bistro near my OB's office." When they sat down to dinner, it wasn't a romantic reunion. Rather, it was an attempt to find a middle ground. Michael was forthright about his failings, acknowledging that he had been selfish. He explained that he'd cut off all contact with Sienna. "It's over," he said, voice trembling. "I don't expect you to believe me right away, but it's true." Elizabeth listened, arms crossed protectively over her stomach. "I'm still hurt, angry, but I want our child to have 2 parents who, at the very least, can be civil. Maybe with time we can salvage some respect between us." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Thank you. That means everything to me." They agreed that Michael would be present for the birth, but on Elizabeth's terms. He offered to drive her to the hospital when the time came, but she wasn't ready for that level of closeness yet. Instead, she allowed him to be in the waiting room if he so wished. In the final weeks leading up to the birth, Michael tried to make amends in small ways. He sent groceries to the mansion, paid for additional housekeeping to lighten Elizabeth's load, and wrote her letters expressing remorse. She didn't respond to most of his gestures, but she didn't return them either. A fragile, cautious bridge was forming between them, built on the shared love for their unborn child. Whatever the future held, separation, reconciliation, or something in between, there was at least a glimmer of hope. Amid the wreckage of betrayal and heartbreak, the impending arrival of a baby sparked the faint possibility of healing. The Redwood story was far from over. And so ends the tumultuous tale of Michael Redwood and Elizabeth, a story of broken vows, betrayal, and the faintest glimmer of redemption. As their child's birth drew near, both faced life-altering decisions. Would they find a way to rebuild, or would they walk separate paths, forever changed by sorrow and regret? Only time would tell if Michael's remorse could mend the deep wounds he had inflicted, and whether Elizabeth's resolve would soften under the weight of her love for their child. If you've been captivated by this roller coaster of emotion, heartbreak, and the resilience of a mother's love, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who love real-life drama stories, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you stories of passion, conflict, and the relentless power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.